Okay, so we're nearly at the end of the course. How are we feeling?
Except for the exam, I'm fine. That's freaking
Yeah, you've done amazing.
The written exam is the one that's a lot. That's a lot.
Yes, it's a lot.
It's a lot.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you've done really amazing. Obviously, we've got the break now for 3 weeks overall. So this will be the last sort of time out to prepare.
Okay.
So I'm giving you. Normally, I do the revision session previous years closer to the exam, but as you have this time now to prepare, it makes sense to go through this stuff now, and so you have that time. So really, you've got that next 3 weeks to do what you need to do. So some of you've got obviously 2 more classes and the revision. So just use it the best way you can. Obviously, you've got time, a few more weeks until we have the theory. And you've all done really well with your theory. You've done the revision questions, and a lot of you have done that. So I'm basically just going to make it easy for you and give you, with this revision sheet, it's kind of making it, I'm giving you a good clue as to what's
going to be
the
on
theory.
Is this everything in here then?
More or less. We'll go through it.
But not like that plus the other two that you've
No.
given.
The other 2 have gone in more depth. So
The other two had the whole anatomy section.
yeah, I mean, I asked you to read through it. There may be specific questions, but again, I'm making it quite simple, quite easy for you. So this sheet is important, in terms of what you need to revise.
Wink, wink.
Wink, 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 wink. Yeah.
Can we give you our answers? And you can just check the answers.
We were just we'll wait to get to that one.
Before the exam.
So because you've already gone through the revision, I don't need to spend ages going through this stuff, but we'll just kind of recap. So what is yoga? Yoga can have 2 meanings. It can either be union, which is the more broader term, or what's yoga within the Yoga Sutras? Can you remember? What do the Yoga Sutras describe yoga as? Do you remember the second chapter, second verse? Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirvana. Yoga is the quiet mind. Yeah. So just to recognise, that yoga has a more broad term of union, but within Raja Yoga or Patanjali's yoga, it's more specific to quieting the mind. Okay. And also have a sense of what you think yoga is to you. How do you understand yoga? Because in the Gita, he talks about equanimity and and meditation and action and all these different things. So it can be more subjective, more relative. When it comes to your understanding, your broader understanding of yoga. But equally, the definition, what the word actually means, what it is within the Yoga Sutras, and again, just having your own interpretation of it, which might be a bit broader and less specific. So then I put origin development of the Vedic culture in Hinduism. So this year is the first year I've played that video, and that video has a different emphasis. The video can you remember the civilization that was Harappa, yeah. So I'd never heard of Harappa, like the Harappa civilization. The way I was always taught is that you had this movement of Central Asian population into northwest India, Pakistan, by the Indus River. That's why Hindu, it's the Indus River, it's the northwest of India. So you had this migration of Central Asians, and they would have brought their own traditions. There was a connection with the Persian Zoroastrianism, and it was more patriarchal. But of course, in that video, it didn't really mention that. It focused more on the existing civilization, the Harappa civilization. What do you remember about that civilization?
It's matriarchal.
It's matriarchal, yeah. Anything else?
It was ritualistic, and there was those statues of the yogi, like lotus position.
Yeah. So there's early signs of yoga from that Harappa civilization. They talked about it being connected to the Sankhya philosophy, but more in a tantric sense. You know, generally we have a matriarchal society. It's probably going to be a bit more tantric. The women were central to their culture. They weren't aggressive, you know, but they had these wars and they were quite advanced, one of the most advanced civilizations. So it did recognise in the video that the Harappa civilization just naturally went through decline, and you had this migration, maybe from the Central Asian, Middle Eastern type area, and they brought in their traditions, which is more the Vedic tradition. So just to be aware, you've got, I've never mentioned Harappa in the previous exam because I didn't even know about it, but I may bring that, what was that civilization, and what was the general way that the Vedic culture
was the
was
movement
born.
from the Harappa?
No, the Harappa was always there.
There was
And you
there.
had the Asian,
Asian
Central
influence.
Asian, who brought their tradition again, and that created the Vedic, which was more patriarchal. So that's obviously come from somewhere, but they would have assimilated.
When you say it was there, you mean in India?
Yeah, in that northwest Indian. So that's where it all was born, the northwest of India. But you'd have, like everything, you'd have probably an amalgamation of new traditions coming in, and also the pre-existing, and that's where you get all these different philosophies and traditions there.
So can I just ask, when you're asking, when we sit down and do this, how long are we going to be sitting down and answer? Is it
It'll be
question
like the
answer?
morning session, so it'll be a
Okay.
couple of hours
Couple of
if
hours.
you want, but some people do it more quickly. So
And is
might
it
take-
question answer, kind of write a paragraph or a couple of paragraphs?
I'll put a number, so it might be a 1, a 2, a 5, an 8, and based on the number will be how much information you put in. So
I
if
see.
it's a 5, I'd expect 5 key points, or 5 pieces of information
I see.
relating to that subject. So if I might say, what is the definition of yoga? It's going to be a one answer, it's huge union to yoga. But if I say, what is your interpretation of yoga? And that might be a bigger, a bigger answer, a bigger number. I'm just curious, as I always like to do, just double checking. Vedic culture. Zoroastrianism and the Vedic religion both stem from Proto-Indo-Iranian language and cultural sphere. Both religions acknowledge deities like Mazda, the supreme god. So Zoroastrianism is the ancient Persian Iranian tradition, and it seems like they had the same roots, but I don't think it was Zoroastrianism that moved, because that's more like 5th century BC, so that's a lot actually later than the Vedic culture. But anyway, there would have been traditions obviously passed down into India and also Persia, similar roots. So
Different tribes, actually.
yeah, well, I don't know. Again, and nobody's really sure. These are all theories anyway. So, but just have an understanding. Northwest, Harappa, migration, developing the Vedic culture.
And that's what started Hinduism.
Yeah, and Hindu was actually, I think, named by the Persians, or even the Mughals much later. That is because of the Hindu, the Indus Valley, the Indus River. That's where you get the Hindu from. But that's a name that was given to but really Hinduism is just lots of different traditions, lots of gods and goddesses and philosophies, which has kind of been amalgamated. But I see Hinduism as very much embraces Christianity and all the different religions. It's a very broad, really embraces all traditions, because they recognise, you can have different avatars in different traditions. It doesn't like it. We're Hindus. Maybe with Islam it's a bit more, because they've had a lot of conflict and stuff. And can you remember, again, maybe we didn't talk about it so much because we just watched the video, but can you remember any qualities of the traditional Vedic culture? Anything you remember about it? Like some of the things that made up the society? Can you remember?
All the different
the traders,
tribes,
the traders
yeah.
and
Can you remember what they are?
status.
Yeah.
The
Fathers,
priest,
the caste
yeah.
system.
So now it's the caste system, but originally it was called Varna. It was based on the colour. It was colour, and it was more. It wasn't so strict, and it was basically recognised that everyone had a natural skill, a natural tendency, and some people are better at selling and being merchants. Some people are better growing stuff. Some people are naturally leaders or politicians or warriors, and some people are priests. So they had those 4 castes, or those 4 colours, and they're related to Brahma. Like, I can't remember exactly. I think the farmers are the feet, and the merchants are I can't remember, the hands, or so. It kind of segregates and breaks up culture and society based on people's natural tendencies to what they like to do with work, and that, what does that create? The whole Vedic culture is very much based on people are in their position and everything works in harmony. And what's Dharma, yeah. So there's this kind of idea of universal Dharma where everyone's in their place, everyone's kind of doing their job, and everything just kind of functions smoothly. So the priests are honouring the gods and making sacrifices so they have rain, so the farmers can grow the crops, and the merchants can sell, and the warriors can protect and lead. Yeah, so it was a very kind of structured, organised system. But what would be the limitation of that system?
There's no movement
Mobility.
Yeah, there's no movement. So
between varnas.
yeah, exactly. And maybe in the past it was more malleable, but now it's very fixed. It's very, very fixed. So there, and what was the name of the original text, the famous text that the whole culture is based on, the whole Hindu culture is based on? The
Vedanta?
No, that's a very specific tradition within the very broad, but it has the word in.
The Vedas.
The Vedas, yeah. So the Vedas are the holy scriptures which the whole Vedic culture is based on. Yeah, the Vedas. And
Said to be dictated by gods and things, weren't they?
it's like God's word, yeah. It's like they've heard, it's remembered. Don't worry too much about this, but the text can either be remembered or heard. Smriti versus Shruti. Shruti is like literally the word of God. So the Vedas are like, it's like the Bible, the word of God. Whereas some of the other texts are remembered. They're more like, they're not as sacred, you could say. But yeah, you don't need to worry about that. So yeah, you had this quite strict system so which caste were the most kind of powerful and controlling of them? Priests, yeah. And they had the direct access to God and nobody else did. So then what happened, a number of things happened around sort of 500 BC that meant things had to change. Can you remember? A number of different things happened.
Was that like the decline of Buddhism or something to do with Jainism?
You're on the right lines. It certainly wasn't the decline of Buddhism, but it's...
So they're on war.
Yeah.
Usually there's a war.
You're kind of on the right lines, but 500 BC.
The emergence of...
Yes? You've already mentioned the words?
Buddhism.
The emergence of Buddhism?
Yeah, and?
Jainism.
Yeah. So you had the emergence of Buddhism, you had the emergence of Jainism. Yeah, these are, they're kind of very much from the Vedic tradition, but they're separate now. These are separate religions. They would have been influenced by the Vedic culture, but they are now their offshoots, but totally different, even though Buddha was supposed to be a Hindu prince, right? And these traditions are called Shramana, S-R-A-M-N-A, Shramana traditions, where they're like ascetics. They're the wanderers, the ascetics. You know what an ascetic is? Like a monk, yeah? And they were probably the first, okay, we have evidence of yogis before from these other traditions, but what would they have been doing? What were the Vedic tradition is very ritualistic. It's the priests doing rituals, connecting to the gods to create positive things in the environment. How is the Buddhist and the Jain tradition different?
Withdrawal.
Sacrificial.
Withdrawal?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Well, not withdrawal. Not sacrificing the self. It would be sort of
Was it?
what I'm looking for.
Yeah,
Was
you're
it
on
where
that
they did
line.
all the random stuff where they act like some would like hold their hand up in the air for
Yeah,
like
grow their
years?
fingernails.
They do, and they do
Like-
stuff like that. But
Yeah.
the Jains, basically, they were very much more meditative, like monks.
Ah.
Yeah, there was more about the personal journey, and what did it introduce? This concept of that anyone can achieve. Not samadhi, but beyond samadhi. Samadhi is just an
Nirvana.
experience. Yeah, nirvana, we call mukti, liberation. Yep. So they start to recognize that you can, you can be a farmer and you can achieve these great, you can achieve freedom essentially. And what happened within the Hindu Vedic tradition? How did that change to kind of keep up with these? And also you had the invasions with the Greeks and you had other stuff, but what happened within the Vedic culture and tradition to kind of keep up with these other traditions which were developing their own philosophies, and there would have been lots of debates and competition within traditions. What emerged through the Hindu line, or particular texts
Mahabharata, the Bhagavad Gita.
that was older,
Upanishads?
Upanishads, yeah.
The Vedanta.
Yeah, like Vedanta as a formalized philosophy came later, but the Upanishads, which are part of Vedanta, were born.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the Upanishads, what text are they part of? What are they part of?
Aren't they the Vedanta? The conclusion of the Vedas, along with the Brahma Sutras and the Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah, you remember that. Yeah, that's the general name for the philosophy. But the Upanishads are part of the Vedas, that end of the Vedas, like you said. Yeah, and that's what Vedanta translates as, the end of the Vedas. And but yeah, basically, it wasn't just Vedanta. It was starting to introduce what's the type of philosophy we're always talking about. It starts
Tantric philosophy? No,
not
not yet.
tantric.
Karma?
Karma is something a bit different.
Raja?
Raja is something different.
Philosophy.
Yeah, what did it start to introduce? This concept of
Oh, dualism and non-dualism.
non-dualism. Yeah, which is kind of the foundation of Vedanta.
Non-dualism.
So you start to get the introduction of non-dualism. So basically, the Upanishads competed with, that philosophy competed with, the Buddhist and the Jain philosophy, and there would have been a lot of debates and discussions and who's got the most superior philosophy. I just want to get a sense of when Vedanta technically was born. So it does refer to Vedanta around that time, but it's related to the Brahma Sutras.
What was that?
Brahma
About 500 BC?
Yeah, but around 400, 450 BCE. But really, when we think of Vedanta, we're talking more about 8th century AD, when these schools became more formalized. Yeah, but there would have been non-dual teachings, before that. But generally, these more formalized schools like Vedanta were a bit later. But doesn't mean there wasn't non-dual. It doesn't mean the teachings weren't there. It's just becoming formalized and institutionalized and taught at universities, that kind of thing. Okay, so it's the philosophy of the Upanishads that came in that do have this non-dual teachings, and that's how the Hindu tradition evolved. And then it talked about freedom as well, that you don't have to be a priest, to be liberated. Anyone can be liberated. So that's kind of how it evolved. And then which text started to mention about bhakti and karma and gyan? Which is the famous text.
Gita.
Yeah, the Gita.
Gita.
Yeah. And so who's in the Gita?
Krishna.
Arjuna and Krishna. Yeah, yeah. And yes, you remember the basics of the Gita. It's a big battlefield. There's the dilemma. He needs to fight his family. And why must he fight his family? To restore his dharma and to restore dharma. So dharma is your personal journey, your personal purpose, but it's also universal order and harmony as well. So it's like double meaning. Yeah. And and what sort of when was that written down, roughly speaking? Can you remember?
Is that 150 BC?
Around that time, 200. I think it's slightly later than the sutras.
Did you say 200?
BC, yeah, and then 100. And then you have the Yoga Sutras around
BC,
150, yeah. BC.
Sutras.
So when was the sutras?
150
Oh, okay.
BC,
So
yeah. And also there's this idea that the Gita is talking about fighting and war. It was as a reaction to the Greek empires and the domination of the Greek empires. And also the Buddhists, because this is now Buddhism is starting to get bigger and bigger. And the Hindu culture is getting suppressed and repressed and pushed down. So then you have this period of time where the Buddhist empire is big, around sort of 300 BC going into the Common Era. And then around 500 AD, the Buddhism starts to lessen, to reduce, and you have this re-emergence of Hinduism, and you have things like Vedanta and Tantra and these other traditions. But what is yoga according to Patanjali? What style of yoga is that? Raja. And what is the goal of Raja? Through
The Eightfold Path.
yeah, specifically.
samadhi.
Yeah. How do you get into samadhi? What's the step before samadhi?
Do you want the 8 stages? Is that
Yeah, you have to meditate.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to go through those 8 stages. It's like a journey of meditation. Yeah. So the Yoga Sutras, but the Yoga Sutras isn't just the Eightfold Path. Can you remember some of the other teachings of the Yoga Sutras?
Women can't be trusted because they're a matter of distraction.
That's the Hatha Yoga.
Say that again.
Besides the Eightfold Path, what else was in the Yoga Sutras?
Can you remember? What other teachings did it
There's a
include?
portion on contemplation.
Sorry.
There's a portion on contemplation, one of the books.
That's part of it.
Contemplation, meditation. No,
Not quite sure what you're referring to there.
I remember reading
I'm trying to. The Yoga Sutras there are 3 books.
Yoga, there's 4
books,
chapters.
4
Yeah.
chapters, yeah. So one is the sort of the philosophy,
You have
and then the asana.
that's the Hatha Yoga Pradipika. Yeah.
That's how.
So basically, I mean, what else does the Yoga Sutras? What things does it introduce? It introduces sanskaras. You know, this idea of these scars. Remember what sanskaras? These impressions, and it gives us way. It talks about how meditation and different things can help to heal the sanskaras or replace the sanskaras with these positive impressions from samadhi. It talks about practice and detachment. It actually gives those 3 levels of to approach yoga from. So if you're advanced, you just need to do practice detachment and just practice your techniques. And then it gave a Kriya Yoga, which included tapasya, aparigraha, devotion to God, ishrana, pranidhana. Don't need to worry about this, but just to recognise there's more than just the Eightfold Path in the Yoga Sutras. But then, of course, the Eightfold Path is what we generally focus on. So what are those 8 steps in the Eightfold Path?
the yamas and the yamas?
Yamas and yamas. Can you remember the yamas?
Is that things you don't do?
Yeah,
No,
non-stealing.
Non-harming.
No harm, non-stealing.
Stealing. No hoarding.
No what, sorry?
Hoarding.
No hoarding, parigraha.
Lying.
Satya, truthfulness. One more.
And
To be a very celibacy.
oh yeah.
You remember?
What's the word?
Brahmacharya. Yeah, Brahma is the creator god and Charya is like to master, to control. So Brahmacharya, yeah. So Ahimsa, Steya, Satya, Brahmacharya, Aparigraha. Yeah. And then, so they're the yamas. And the niyamas, what does niyama mean?
Things you do.
Things you do. So what are they?
Observances.
The observances. What, can you remember what those are? They are? English or Sanskrit?
Reading religious scripture.
Yes, Vajaya.
Being
Cleanliness.
clean.
Yeah.
cleanliness.
Saucha.
Contentment.
Santosha.
Five, isn't it?
Do we need to learn these?
Yeah, you need to learn these, definitely.
I used to
Brownie
know.
points for Sanskrit. Ishwara Pranidhana, devotion to God or the Guru. Yeah, and tapasya, which is like a discipline or austerity. You know, being able to manage challenges and hot, heat and cold, and being able to sit in discomfort, things like that. Okay, so that's 1 and 2. Yamas, niyamas. Number 3.
Asana.
Sana. 4. Pranayama. 5. Pratyahara, which means
Withdrawal.
yeah. 6. Dharana. Yeah, which means
Meditation.
no.
Is it meditation?
Before meditation.
Concentration.
Concentration. Yeah. Number 7.
Dhyana.
Yeah, dhyana. And the number 8.
Samadhi.
Samadhi. What is samadhi?
State of bliss.
Freedom.
Yeah, it means absorption is that blissful state, but it's when, according to the Yoga Sutras, you become one with your true self. And can you remember what that's called in the Sankhya or the Yoga philosophy?
State of oneness, isn't it?
Oneness is non-dual, and it's kind of a bit later. But remember, yoga was traditionally based on duality.
Oh, state of separation.
Yeah. So what are you separating from? You should know this in your essay on it. You're separating from what are the 2 things in Sankhya? It's in yoga. The 2 realities. Prakriti. Yeah, which is what?
Matter.
Yeah, nature. Or nature, matter. And the other one?
Purusha.
Purusha is the soul. Yeah. So they're kind of combined, the soul and the body and the mind.
Just
and the
that
thought.
question alone feels like it's 5 pages long.
Yeah.
Just saying
Yeah.
So originally it was the state of separation.
Yeah,
Those 2 things.
it's a separation of your, and prakriti includes the mind, the emotions, the personality, the ego, and really the goal is to separate your identity from that stuff and rest in your true natural self, the Purusha, which is pure and luminous and blissful and peaceful. Yeah, does that make sense? And then in more modern times, it's been incorporated into what type of philosophy? Yoga is more incorporated into non-dual. What's the term for a very broad? What hatha yoga is part of? It's a broad.
Raja.
Not Raja, but it's kind of incorporates Raja. Tantra, yeah. So Tantra, like Hatha Yoga is from Tantra, it's when we start to go more into non-duality. But remember, that was a lot later. That's like 1,000 years later. Does that make sense? I know we talked about it quite a bit, and it is quite tricky to get your head around.
Yeah.
But just to remember, yoga was dualistic originally, and it was a separation of your soul from nature, the identity. So I'm not the body, I'm not the mind, I'm not the emotions, I am the pure seer. That is Purusha, that is the soul. And then later, with Tantra, you had a slightly different understanding. Any questions about that?
Are we going to post this video?
Yeah, I'll post it. Yeah. So they're the more advanced questions, and you're not expected to get everything right, but yeah. So fast forward, Hatha Yoga. What is Hatha Yoga, and where did it originate from, and how is it different from Raja Yoga?
How is it different from Raja, or how is it different from Vinyasa flow? Because you've got two different
From like
questions.
Yoga Sutras.
It's more just to do with the asanas, isn't it?
The asanas is part of it, yeah. But tell me more about Hatha Yoga traditionally, originally. It's asanas. There's asanas. What else is there?
Breathing.
Pranayama is more described and goes into more depth. Yeah. What else?
Like rituals like neti and stuff like that.
What are they called?
Cleanses,
Cleanses.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're the cleanses. The shatkamas, the 6 cleanses. Shatkamas. What else do they have?
So which bit are we on now? Sorry, about the... Oh, we're not on it.
The second to last bullet on philosophy.
Yeah, we're kind of looking at
Oh, okay.
4 main chapters. We're just talking generally about Hatha Yoga.
Is that where Ayurveda stemmed from?
Ayurveda is older. Yeah, Ayurveda is more from the Vedas. So, can you remember the 4? I mean, it's easy because it's the 4 chapters that kind of the Hatha Yoga Pradipika. Can you remember those 4 chapters? What they are?
Asana.
So, asana is the first one. Second one,
Pranayama.
pranayama. Yeah, and I think in that chapter is also the kriyas, the shakriyas. The third one, which is also something a bit unique to Hatha Yoga. You remember the third chapter? What are those things that we do?
Oh, bandhas.
Yeah,
Oh,
mudras and bandhas.
Yeah.
And do you remember there's some really weird stuff like cutting your tongue and there's some sexual things and all sorts of stuff. So that it was quite tantric. It was a bit out there. Like it mentioned some quite far out practices and techniques. If you can remember some of them, like stuff to do with cow dung and urine and cutting your tongue. Hey?
The turmeric root. Yeah.
The two what?
Turmeric root.
Turmeric root.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
I can't remember that one. Yeah, there's lots of wild. Yeah, so the mudras and bandhas, and the fourth chapter. Do you remember? What's the end goal of Hatha Yoga?
The concentration.
Samadhi. Yeah, concentration, absorption. So the end goal is the same, samadhi, and really the end goal of Hatha Yoga is raja, is this meditation, absorption, but it goes about it differently. The Yoga Sutras, the method is a bit stricter and more like pure about meditation, whereas Hatha Yoga, you have all these practices and, originally asana in the Eightfold Path, we're not really sure, but, it might just be sitting. That was the posture, that's how they, remember this is very much influenced from the Buddhist and the Jain traditions. There's a lot of Buddhist influence in the Eightfold Path. So asana may simply just be this, according to the Eightfold Path. But in Hatha Yoga, asana is all the things that we know today. So it's much more physically focused, cleansing. What's the goal of Hatha Yoga, really? Well, one of the goals, other than we're achieving samadhi, but how are we doing that? What's the goal?
Purifying the body.
Yeah, we're purifying the body, we're evolving the body, we're taking the body with us. We're not ignoring the body or rejecting the body. It's very much like the body needs to be healed and transformed to allow us. And that's the difference in Tantra, and Vedanta, old school Vedanta is Vedanta is that everything's an illusion. Just spirit is the only thing that's real. But in Tantra, everything is God. The body's God, the chakras, everything. So we need the body, we need to evolve the body as we evolve our mind. It's not just about the mind, it's also the body. The body is this microcosm of the universe. It's really important. Does that make sense? Yeah, Tantra. I'm not going to go too deep into all this stuff, but I expect you to have a basic understanding of the Yoga Sutras, the Eightfold Path, Bhagavad Gita, Hatha Yoga, difference between Hatha and Raja, difference between Hatha and Vinyasa. What can you say that's obviously now more modern times? What would be the difference?
Vinyasa's more of a flow, whereas Hatha can be
vinyasas with the, like, from the Ashtanga background with the samsara A and B.
That's it. Yeah.
I'm sorry, what did you say? I didn't hear you.
So Hatha is with the classical sun salutations, then your other postures separately, whereas your vinyasa comes from the Ashtanga background with samsaras A and B, with your standing postures incorporated in as vinyasas.
Yeah. Vinyasa tends to be, like I said, more fluid, flowing with the breath. You've got a lot of connecting vinyasas, up dog, down dog. The standing poses are integrated within the sun salutation. It tends to be more challenging, it tends to be quicker. Hatha yoga is generally slower, there's a more extensive warm-up. You'll do probably breath work if it's a proper Hatha yoga class. Classical sun salutations, you hold the positions for longer, you do the positions separately. You'll do a whole seated section and an extended relaxation. But again, vinyasa is from Hatha, so really vinyasa is just an adaptation of Hatha.
Oh, so vinyasa is from Hatha, not from Ashtanga.
Ashtanga is from Hatha.
Everything's from Hatha. And this Ashtanga's quite new. Not that long.
Ashtanga is like early 20th century. But you have the different branches of yoga. You have the south, which was Ashtanga and Iyengar, and you have the north, which is more Shivananda, Hatha, pure Hatha, Tantric Hatha. Yeah, they're just like slightly.
An Ashtanga is a set sequence of no.
Ashtanga is a set sequence.
Series.
Yeah,
Set
series,
series.
primary, second, you have three.
You don't
Primary.
need to know anything about
No,
Ashtanga.
just have an awareness. Yeah, you need to know the full sequence. No, you don't even need to know about Ashtanga, but it's good, to have it's one of the most famous styles, so it's important just to at least be aware of it. Ashtanga, Iyengar, Kundalini. But don't worry too much about that. So we've already talked about the Gita, just kind of go back a bit. Quickly, what are the three yogas? What's the definition?
Bhakti.
Bhakti, what's Bhakti?
Devotion.
Devotion, yeah. The others?
Karma.
Karma, what's karma?
Action.
Action, service, yeah. And then the last one?
Is it jhana? And it's
Gyan.
jhana, wisdom studying.
Gyan is like the wisdom, the path of wisdom, which generally, starts to go into the non-duality stuff and the Vedanta stuff. Right. So yeah, again, it's all there. Sana, just like I said, awareness of some of the more famous styles now. I will expect you to know some of the Sanskrit of some of the most well-known poses, so not like the more obscure ones, but things like, I can't remember off the top of my head, but yeah, there'll probably be down dog, maybe a warrior, cobra, that kind of thing. Some of the most famous ones. And then there'll be some postures where I'll ask you what their English name is. Yeah. So we've not done like loads of postures, so just do your best, but definitely learn some of the more famous Sanskrit if you can. And then, hopefully you have an awareness of, the positions we've done named, at least the English. Is that okay? Yeah. And yeah. Key to good Shavasana, I won't worry too much about that. Sequencing, have a basic understanding of what a peak pose is. Again, it's pretty straightforward stuff. Again, pranayama, it's all there. What is prana? Pranayama. Have an awareness of like the key pranayamas. And I'll include Kapalabhati. Technically, it's a shakriya, it's a cleanse, but we'll count it as a pranayama, it's fine. And just being at least aware of the vayu. Can you remember what the vayus are?
Movement of wind or oxygen through the body.
Yeah, it's the way the wind, prana moves in the body. So apana is excretion, and there's 5. I don't expect you to know all of them, but at least to have an awareness of what the vayu means wind.
So it's 5 in all.
There's 5. It's the way prana moves in the body, and therefore which kosha is it connected to?
Manomayaku.
No. The clue's in the name.
What
Pranamaya. Yeah. Vayu. Yeah. Vayus are connected. And what are the koshas?
The sheaths.
Sheaths. Yes. For those who've done the workshops with Sam. The sheaths. So you could say that the layers of our being. It can get confusing if you say bodies, because then you can have an understanding of bodies. But yeah, the sheaths, the layers. And what are those sheaths? Anamaya. What's Anamaya? What's the most superficial? Physical. Yeah. And then the next one? No.
Emotional.
No. Pranamaya. We've just mentioned it. What is pranamaya?
Energy.
It's the energy body. Yeah, the energy, the breath, the energy. Then after that, Manamaya is the thoughts, it's more instinctual thoughts and emotions. Yeah. And then after that,
Do we need to remember these 5?
yeah. Can you remember? It's the wisdom body. Can you remember the name for that? Vijnanamaya.
Where is that in this question? Where is it?
We've
It's
skipped down a bit.
unsubtle body.
Subtle body, yeah. We've
Subtle
skipped
body.
down a bit.
Okay.
Vijnanamaya, and then the last one?
Bliss body.
Bliss, Anandamaya. Yeah. So I expect you to know those 5, have an understanding of the koshas, and while we're there,
Oh, sorry. I
the
didn't
7 chakras, have a basic understanding. Does anyone know the names?
I can remember all this.
I'm sorry.
I can remember all this.
No, but I mean brownie points if you do, but you won't.
I think I actually know.
Like not Muladhara.
Muladhara is number
Muladhara.
1.
Manipura.
Manipura is number 3.
Anahata.
Anahata is number 4.
Sacral chakra.
Svadhisthana.
Svadhisthana is number 2.
Manipura. Anahata.
Vishuddha, yeah.
Ajna.
Sahasrara. Yeah, but otherwise we call it root. Well, what would be the English terms? So, root, sacral,
solar plexus.
yeah,
Heart.
heart, yeah,
Third eye.
or brow, crown, yeah. Okay, so as long as you know one of those, and then I might ask you on one chakra, like, give me a few pointers about what it what are the qualities of it, what does it govern, what does it deal with. So it can be basic stuff, like, obviously if it was the heart, it like love and grief and connection.
So you don't need to know that detail about every chakra.
Well, you don't know which chakra I'm going to ask.
Oh, you're not going to ask us to,
Come on.
No, I'm going to choose one, and you're going to have to know. But only basic stuff. So you should know the basics about each chakra. Like it can be anything from the color, the element, the sound, but the properties. I think you should know the properties by be expected to have an appreciation of the properties. And then what are the main nadis? Ida, Pingala, Sushumna. Yeah, and what's Ida? Left side, and it's the feminine. Yeah, corresponds to which nervous system? Parasympathetic. Yeah. Yin. Yeah, fine. Yeah, yin. And what's the other one? Pingala. So what therefore must that be? Masculine. Sympathetic. Yeah. And what's the idea within Tantra and Kundalini Yoga and Hatha Yoga? What we're trying to do?
Move the energy.
We're trying to move the energy, and what also we're trying to do? Yeah, how do we move the energy? How do we awaken Sushumna?
The serpent at the base of the spine.
Yeah, but how do we do that?
Rising.
Yeah, but what do we have to do with Ida and Pingala?
Balance.
Balance them. Yeah, so that's the whole point of Nadi Shodhana. We're looking to balance those 2 energies, and if we balance those 2 energies, then what supposedly happens?
Kundalini.
Well, maybe not quite there. Not just yet, but Sushumna opens the central channel and Kundalini moves up and it goes through the chakras and activates the crown. That is like the basic fundamental teaching of Kundalini Yoga, Tantra Yoga, Hatha Yoga. Yeah. So just just be aware of the nadis. And, I'm not going to expect you to explain all of that, but using this as a recap. Any questions about that so far? Quite quickly through it all. Okay, so meditation, meaning of meditation. I often put that question, and then I get lots of like vague terms. I like to have the understanding of meditation according to the sutras. I'm making this super easy for you, but what is meditation according to the Eightfold Path? What is the definition of dana? How is it described? So we're back onto meditation. Meaning of meditation.
One point of absorption.
Yeah, one pointed focus, attention. Yeah, undisturbed concentration. That's what differentiates it from dana. Concentration, you still can get distracted. You're not completely fixed, whereas meditation is completely fixed. Yeah, one focus meditation. Purpose and goal of meditation. And there could be multiple answers to that. Quiet the mind, focus the mind. Yeah, mantra. Can you remember what mantra translates as? So manas is mind, and tra is liberation, transcendence, triati. So it's liberation of the mind. And can you remember those different types of mantra? Obviously this is a little bit more difficult, you'll have to look at your notes again. Can you remember the bija, saguna, nirguna mantra? Can you remember what they are?
Bija's a seed mantra.
Very good. Bija is a seed mantra, so an example of that could be Om, yeah, Hrim, Shrim, Klim, all these funny sounds, Krang, Kring, Krong. They have like these real powerful energies that relate to deities. Yeah. But yeah, Om is the most famous. Also, we generally see the chakra mantras, Lam, Vam, Ram, Yam. They're Bija mantras also. Saguna, what could be a Saguna mantra?
Is that a 2-syllable?
No, not necessarily, but generally the Bija are a single syllable.
Is it Saguna? Is that for a god or a deity?
That's correct, yeah. So Sa is with and Guna is quality. Remember we talked about the qualities? And I may even add that question about the gunas. But Sa Gunas means with quality, God with quality, which means a God with a personality, a personalised God. So what could be an example of a mantra to a personalised God in the Hindu tradition?
This one that we
The
did.
elephant one. I can't think of his name.
Nelly the elephant.
We did it before.
Yeah, you must know one mantra.
Yeah.
surely.
We did the one for the
Lakshmi.
Lakshmi.
Yeah, can you remember that one?
Yeah. You were going to give us the recording of it, but you didn't.
I don't know. I'll see, I've still got that somewhere.
Um,
So we've got
Something.
well,
I'm gonna.
yeah, that's it.
What's
Om Mani Padme Hum is Buddhist, but it's a Saguna mantra, you could say. It's like Om Namah Shivaya.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did that one. Om Sri Lakshmi Namaha. That would be Lakshmi. Om Gum Ganapate. So Gum is the Bija mantra for Ganesha. Om Gum Ganapate Namah. But Om Namah Shivaya is the... Yeah, I mean, Om Namah Shivaya, you know, you should know that one. Om Namah Shivaya is pretty standard. It's the most famous, probably, mantra in the world. But then you've got Gayatri Mantra, remember? Gayatri Mantra, Om Bhurvasva. I'm not expecting you to know that, but remember, the Gayatri Mantra is famous. There's a few other big famous mantras. There's mantras for all the different deities. So then what is a Nirguna mantra? So Sa is with and Nir is without. So it's a mantra to a non-personal God. So what God would that be then?
Shiva.
Shiva is recognised to be both actually, but it'd be like Brahman or Shiva. It's like it's more like non-dualistic mantra. So Soham, I am that. Shivoham, I am Shiva. Om can be considered a Nirguna mantra. There are these famous sayings. They're more like sayings like Tattvamasi, that thou art. Aham Brahmasmi, I am
Yes.
Brahman. Hey?
It rolls off your tongue, but
Basically, it's the non-dual mantras. Like I am that. So Soham is probably the most famous one. So it's like I'm not worshipping God as something external. I'm worshipping myself. I recognise the divinity within me. as the infinite. So that's like the nirguna. So just so you're aware, there are these different types of mantra. Yeah? Cool. Then we skip to lifestyle. What are the doshas in Ayurveda?
Vata,
Vata,
Pitta,
Pitta,
Kapha.
Kapha. Yeah. Can you remember the elements of those three?
Fire,
Pitta.
Pitta is fire and
Earth.
Nope.
Water.
fire and water for Pitta. Yeah. Vata is air and
What? No.
air and
And water.
ether.
Ether.
Yeah. And for Kapha,
Earth and water.
yeah. So what are the 5 elements in order?
Oh, I don't know.
fire, water, air, ether,
Fire, water, air,
earth.
earth,
I mean, they're not in order.
yeah. Earth. What's after earth?
Water.
Water,
Are we doing the
Fire.
Air, ether.
air,
I've
ether.
never known an order, I don't think.
So what
It's
is
just
the
one
order?
of the
Say
most
that
solid.
again.
It's like from
Yeah,
the most
we're
solid.
Yeah.
kind of just throwing it out. What's the order?
From the most dense to the most light. So
So what is
earth,
it?
earth, water, fire, air, ether.
Earth, water, fire,
Fire.
earth. Oh, earth, water, fire, air.
Air.
Ether.
So it's the 5 elements in order.
Just dense to light.
Yeah. But I'm not going to expect you to know that, for example. I
Well,
know,
that's
so-
easier to remember than
Mm.
some of this other stuff. So.
So what is the goal in Ayurveda? What are you trying to do?
Balance the door.
Balance, yeah,
Balance.
balance your doshas.
Yeah, with, like against your natural type, you've got to counter that.
Yeah. Balance the elements within you, balance the doshas. Can you remember what Ayurveda actually means? Ayurveda?
Is it study of health or something?
Yeah, wisdom of life. Yeah, Veda again means
Life was
Vedas means knowledge, wisdom, and Ayur is life. Then I've added that. Why is a health form important when teaching? It's just something I did just yesterday, so it's common sense. But why? I don't know if I'll include that in the exam, but basic stuff about screening students. Obviously, you need to know if people have injuries or anything like that. And then in anatomy and physiology, there's not a lot of A and P on the exam. Basically,
I don't have any peace with it.
I think there'll be a question like you can choose a system, for example, nervous system, muscular system, cardiovascular system to write about. I can't remember exactly all the different ones.
Sorry, can you just say that bit again?
So I'm just on number 4. There's one question that asks you to describe a system.
Okay.
I can't remember exactly the systems on the exam paper, but there are a couple of them at least.
So just get to know one system really well.
Yeah. I might just see if I can find the exam paper. So yeah, have a basic understanding. Vagus nerve is always good to know. Basic understanding of
The vagus is part of the nervous system. Oh, you've got that as a separate question, okay.
yeah. Understand. I think the breath is within the systems, mechanics of breathing, cardiovascular system, respiratory system.
Hip pitch issue.
Can you remember about the hip hitch issue?
Trendelberg gate.
Yes, I know that one.
What is it?
Trendelberg gate.
Say that again?
Trendelberg gate. When
What?
you the ones
I don't
not
know.
being hip pitched if the
Yes,
Trendle-
you look like you're
Trendelberg.
walking a bit. Like, they don't, one leg's bigger than longer than the other. You look like you kind of.
I think
But it's not
It's been a
necessarily
long
to
time
do
since
with
we've
the
done
pelvis.
Yeah, can you remember like if you
We did it, Chrissy, when we did the postural stuff. It wasn't actually that long ago. Do you remember when we all looked
Yeah,
at each
but
other's
it
posture?
was fast.
we did it with
fast.
Rachel, didn't we?
Oh, did you? Well, I didn't hear that.
So
Ah,
it-
yeah,
that
that was
was
backing up to
long.
that talk.
of course you can
Because I don't
record
remember
all the
those
video.
terms.
Because we
I
measure
remember
if our feet were level, well,
we
if our
were
hips
using
were
those
level.
terms when we did postural stuff. I don't remember hearing those then.
Yeah.
It's in our notes.
There's
I'm
a
sure it
go
is.
back through the slides.
It's
on
in-
the
it's in
slides.
the,
Rachel second.
It's in the postural stuff.
I don't know
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
one is it, but it
So
was-
basically,
Feeling
if you're
right.
hitching on one side, then your knees, your hips, your spine gets affected. You lift up and it can
Yeah.
put pressure on the knee, on the lower back, the SI joint. The spine can go into torsion, can create hip issues, knee issues, spine issues. It's very common. You see it a lot. Can you remember some of the signs that we can tell if someone's hip hitching?
We did that leg lift.
Yeah, you know, we have the legs, one leg being longer.
Oh,
That's more
Wasted,
glutes to
yeah.
lift the legs, but if one leg is showing longer, then the hips aren't level, and that then affects the way you walk, and it can affect your joints.
And how does it affect? Sorry, this is a bit of a digression, but in terms of what people with that condition, if you notice it with someone, how does it affect what they can do in
It depends, like how advanced it is. Like arguably, we all have it to some
Yeah.
degree because the body isn't symmetrical, and we all go into slight misalignment. But it depends. Like if someone's having a lot of hip and lower back issues, obviously they can be limited by what they can do. They may find back bends really challenging, or any sort of hip work if it's bad. But if it's not, then they can just do anything. It depends how advanced it is.
So is it just going to define their limitations in certain poses then, in terms of?
It depends if like there's no symptoms, they'll be able to do just everything normally.
Oh, okay.
Because it's just like if I've got one shoulder higher than the other, I might get a bit of tightness here, but I can still do everything. But if it's really severe, I'll get a lot of neck pain, headaches.
Yeah.
I may have rotator cuff injury issues, and then I might not be able to move my shoulder. It's the same with the hip itch. It can be nothing, or if it's really advanced, you could be having a lot of, prolapsed disc, slip disc, SI joint issues, arthritic hip, arthritic knees. All these. But this can take decades.
And can it be reversed? Like, is it a physio thing? Someone
If you catch it early enough, there's
Yeah.
lots of things. Often it's from the feet, so people are not grounded in the feet. So just have an understanding of the foot mechanics, like the pada banda, and a bit of technicality if you can, the arch, understanding pada banda. The planes of movement, abduction, adduction, extension, flexion, and then the key muscles around the hips as well. So what is the main muscles involved, like that are often weak, or there'd be issues with the hip
Where are
pitch.
you now on this? You're jumping around.
Where are you bottom and
The
so
bottom there, the hip
Hip and
pitch.
shoulder. Okay.
Can you remember what muscles?
Glutes.
Glutes, and what are the three glutes? Can you remember?
Maximus.
Yeah, max is your buttock, and then the other two,
Medius and minimus.
medius and minimus. They're on the side of the hip. So it's generally when there's hip issues, it's to do with your glutes. So glute medius on the side, glute max, on the back. These often weak or tight, and then they, that's a sign as well. If someone's really tight on one side but weak on the other side, chances are they've got some imbalance around the hips. And the same with the shoulder, like so. What are some of those key muscles around the shoulder which you often hear about? These kind of buzzword muscles. Rotator cuffs. So you have two on the front, two on the back, and often if people have shoulder issues, they've done something with their rotator cuff.
Would we be expected to name all of the?
No, but just have
Rotator-
a bit of
rotator.
awareness of the rotator cuff, as a group of muscles. We've still got time when we come back, so I can answer any questions, but given you that. As long as you follow that, as long as you revise, and you'll be fine.
It's nice to have it in a grouping.
Yeah, it makes it easy for you. As long as you do some
It's pretty
revision.
much the same it's the same stuff that we had before Christmas.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A lot of it is you're very familiar with. You'll all be fine as long as you remember the Eightfold Path and remember what Bhakti is and who Arjuna is and the basic stuff. You'll be fine. And then there may be a few little challenging, tricky ones just to test you, just to see like about non-duality or Prakriti and Purush. Just they are the next level. But there'll only be a couple of those just to see if you retain that. So you'll be fine, but I basically made it very easy for you. So just because A&P is vast amounts of stuff there. So But just look through your notes and pick a system, because you'll be expected to write a bit more depth, about a particular system. So choose a system that you like. I can always tell you which of those systems are to choose from to make it super easy for you. I think it's already mentioned there, most of them. So again, we'll have time when we come back. We'll have 2 weeks, won't we? And then we have the exam, first week of exams, and then we have the theory. So we'll still have like 3 sessions together. But I want to give you this now, so you have time to prepare. But we can always go through anything if you're not sure when we get back. Is that okay?
Thank you.
I'm sure you'll be great. And you'll do fine.
And you'll post this video? Mostly when
So
we're
we're back
talking
on
about
the
the philosophies and
Two.
It's 2, but it'll be like 3, won't it? 'Cause